I like that picture, Tony.
Oh yeah, it's Eric Ricardo. I've learned to use it as my backdrop. So
Yeah,
That's good.
classy. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, it looks like our numbers are pretty steady. So good evening and welcome to the proceedings of the Grand Rapids Public School Board. Today is Monday, July 13th. And Ms. Lewis, can you please take the roll?
Yes. Ms. Williams is excused. Dr. Baker,
here,
Ms. Davis,
Here.
Dr. Flores is excused. Ms. Lewis is here. Reverend Matthias,
Here.
Mr. Ross,
Here.
Ms. Shotke,
Here.
President Grant.
Here.
There's a quorum.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So
So
moved.
moved.
Or
I'm sorry. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. All right. So we will get started with the agenda. First, we will start with celebrations, and I will turn things over to Dr. Roby.
Thank you. Good evening, board members, staff, and listening audience. Thank you for being present during our virtual board meeting this evening. We have one celebration lined up. This was requested by Reverend Matthias back in early June. Of note, KSSN, which stands for the Kent Schools Support Network, I might not have that correctly, has been a strong partner with the district and has supported our students during the closure of the pandemic with lots of wraparound services. Melvin Atkins II will be introducing our guest, the executive director of the Kent School Service Network. And I'd like to invite Mr. Atkins forward.
Good evening, Dr. Roby, President Grant, members of the board. I would like my pleasure today to briefly just say thank you to KSSN for since really 2006 when we were a pilot. We were originally one of the pilot sites. We had 6 sites that were part of KSSN, and they bring really what they do is bring health and human services to the neighborhood. And so there's like a one-stop shop for wraparound services for the support. And we have grown into 13 schools currently. And we can't thank you enough, KSSN, for the efforts they have done over these years, but especially during the time of COVID. And so I would like to introduce the executive director of KSSN, Carol Payne McGovern, just to say a few words about the organization.
Good evening, Dr. Roby and Grand Rapids Public School Board. Thanks again for acknowledgement of the Kent School Services Network and our work and partnership over the years. On behalf of the KSSN Board of Directors and staff, we would like to bring a warm welcome to Dr. Roby to our community. We're looking forward to getting to know you and working with you as well. Kent School Services Network, or KSSN, is a community school initiative that organizes services and supports for students in 13 schools in GRPS. The whole goal of KSSN is to break down the barriers to learning. We found in March 13th that things did change. KSSN became a virtual place and a set of partnerships. And we became busy in terms of trying to figure out how do you change a community school as a place and a building to the community. And this doesn't happen without a lot of community partnerships. We first began with an online referral form that went to all teachers and support staff and principals as they reached out to students and families and found the needs. That referral form then was passed along to our community school coordinators who got to work. As you've all heard, basic needs were at the top of the list of needs. Food became a huge issue. So along with the food that was the food opportunities through the school, we also organized community food pantries, porch deliveries on a regular basis, reaching out to different restaurants and grocery stores for culturally specific foods as well. Bus tickets became an item. personal care, hygiene products, cleaning supplies. We found and were able to deliver to porches as well through a United Way grant that we received, masks. And then also working with our families to figure out devices, to also look at how to connect, pick up Comcast and hotspots as well. And then one of the biggest needs that also rose during this time and will continue was mental health referrals. And those mental health referrals were then passed along from the community schools coordinators to our 3 partner agencies, Arbor Circle, DA Blodgett, St. John's, and Family Outreach Center. And their site team clinicians began delivering teletherapy to students and families across the 13 schools. In a couple quick specific schools, one of our coordinators and her clinician continued their work with a domestic violence support group that they call Open Doors that has continued virtually throughout the shutdown. Several coordinators started Facebook Live daily shows where they read books to their students and had guest book readers come in and guest speakers come in as well. Another coordinator set up a WhatsApp to continue to connect with her families and the parents through the community. La Luca Fund, which was through the Grand Rapids Community Foundation, helped support underdocumented families with rent and utilities, as well as a partnership Burton Elementary had with Mars Hills, where they placed some dollars in place to really help families at this point in time with their rent and utilities as well. And those will continue until the funds are spent. We are, a big part of was communicating to families, which our coordinators speak the language of their students and families, and through the leadership of the principals and the district, we were able to keep things moving along and hopefully have created a virtual community school where that continues building the culture and climate of the school when they do return. We are looking forward to our 14th year of partnership with Grand Rapids Public Schools. We look forward to new leadership with Dr. Roby, getting to know you, and thank you once again, the board of directors. The work that you do and your tireless passion and work with bringing in partnerships like KSSN and many others to support the amazing students of Grand Rapids Public Schools. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carol.
Thanks.
Wow, amazing.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I was having a little microphone difficulty. Are there any further comments or questions?
I just really appreciate the work as always.
Yes, thank you very much.
Yeah, I can only imagine the just what you cited there, the many details, both of GRPS staff as well, who reached into and had other partners to rely on that they can pass information to, that made it easier for families and their needs to be met. I suspect that a lot of the mental health has risen, the stress levels of parents having to care for their children 24/7. And so all these partnerships are so critical. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
We do not have a secretary's report this evening, so we will move to committee chair updates. And Ms. Davis, we will start with the policy committee.
Okay, so we had a policy meeting a couple weeks ago, and we have a few policies on the agenda that we need to, under the action items that we need to approve tonight. So it might be best if I go through those policies as one at a time once we get to that part, if that makes sense.
Yes, let's do that. Are there any other items from the policy committee meeting that you would like to speak to?
Not that haven't already been addressed in the previous meeting, so we're all set.
Okay, wonderful, thank you. Next, we have the superintendent's report.
Good evening once again. I am so very excited. This is my first official board meeting. And so I'll just give an overview of what has been taking place over the last 11 days. Our leadership team began the week with leadership development and planning. We are beginning to map out our back to school plan. This work will continue later in this week with our full cabinet. Our work will entail both federal, state, local COVID preparedness and response plans, and include additional safety measures and considerations for GRPS students and staff. Additionally, our parent and guardian survey went live today to gain additional information from our parents related to their preferred method of instruction. More details, including timelines related to this work, will be shared in the coming 2 weeks. Tonight, we will be sharing data from our staff distance learning survey, which was conducted late this spring of the 2019-2020 school year. It includes information from teachers and building leaders related to the experiences, as well as the challenges needed to help support staff as they continued with the alternative method of instructional delivery. At this time, I'd like to invite Mel Atkins II, to provide an executive overview of the summary survey data, along with his team member, Miss Alexandra Watson, who will provide an overview of the data that was collected. So if you will let them back into the room.
Good evening once again. It's good to be back. And we conducted a survey at the beginning of June, like Dr. Roby said, is our distance learning staff survey. And Alex Watson from our assessment and evaluation department is conducted the survey and the results. And she's here to briefly give an overview of the survey results. And I'm going to share the screen.
All right, thank you, Mel. Good evening, Dr. Roby, President Grant, and board members. Today, as Mel said, I will be sharing the results from the distance learning staff survey that was administered to all GRPS employees with the goal of better understanding what worked well and what improvements can be made in the implementation of distance learning. The survey was open, as Dr. Roby said, during the spring. It started on June 1 and went through June 8. And the responses were collected electronically through SurveyMonkey. In total, there were 1,170 surveys that were completed, which is approximately a 51% response rate. Teachers made up the role group with the largest number of responses, with a total of 759 surveys completed, and that equals a 65% response rate. That was followed by role group of staff who identified as another role, which had 317 surveys, a 27% response rate, in building administrators, which were 94 or 8% response rate. And then I also want to emphasize that every building had at least one survey completed. So we had a broad representation across the district. So on the survey, employees were asked a couple questions, but the overall was really looking at their satisfaction. So they were asked to indicate their overall level of satisfaction with the distance learning model that was implemented by GRPS. Overall, 85% of respondents reported being satisfied or very satisfied with the distance learning model. When compared by role type, building administrators, as shown in graph 2, reported the highest level of satisfaction, with 92% being satisfied or very satisfied, whereas teachers reported the lowest level of satisfaction. Graph 3 is also comparing those satisfaction levels by building division. Employees working in a K-5 building reported the highest level of satisfaction, which is right at that average of 85%, whereas employees working in a K-8 building reported the lowest level of satisfaction. The next slide is going to talk about the elements of instructional delivery. So employees who identified themselves as either a teacher or other role group, just not building administrators, were asked to report their level of competence in their ability to accomplish multiple tasks while implementing distance learning. Respondents reported the highest level of competence in their ability to use the identified technology tools, with 85% reported being confident or very confident, and that's that first bar. Respondents reported the lowest level of confidence in their ability to reach students who were not engaged, with only 38% reported being confident or very confident, and the largest proportion at 41% only being somewhat confident. Respondents were also asked about the availability of resources and support, and looking at what additional support is needed in the implementation of distance learning. And it's important to note that this was a select all that apply question, allowing respondents to select more than one response. And the most frequent area in which additional support was requested was in student engagement. 65% of all respondents requested additional support in this area. And this echoes the low level of confidence reported in the employee's ability to reach students who are not engaged that I referenced on that previous slide. At the end of the survey, staff were asked to report the most effective strategy that they implemented during distance learning, along with the barriers that they faced. Both open-ended questions were analyzed using qualitative thematic analysis. In this process, each response is reviewed to identify similarities and patterns and to identify overall themes. So I'm just going to be presenting on some of the themes that really arose and stood out. When asked around the most effective strategies, these were some high-level themes. So in terms of delivering instruction, the need to be flexible while also maintaining a consistent schedule was emphasized. Employees also reported that mirroring the traditional school day as much as possible was important. Related to engaging students, employees reported that having regular student shout-outs served as a great motivation for students and helped maintain their engagement. Strategies to monitor learning and provide feedback were also discussed, as respondents reported that assigning work with progress monitoring built in, such as having students record themselves explaining how they completed an assignment, was effective. And when asked around any barriers that they faced in effectively implementing distance learning, the following themes arose. So related to student and family engagement, staff felt that the lack of accountability and lack of clear expectations for students, families, and staff alike made it difficult to engage both groups in a consistent manner. In addition, while staff reported being confident in using the identified technology themselves, they felt that students and family access to technology and use of technology was a barrier. They often reported spending a lot of time assisting the students and families in using the technology that took away from instructional time. While staff also appreciated the multiple methods of communication, they also stated it was overwhelming and they often did not know what they should be prioritizing. So for instance, in checking GroupWise or Microsoft Teams or Google, they felt kind of overwhelmed with the abundance of communication. In terms of instructional delivery, staff reported that it was difficult to adapt the curriculum to be delivered virtually, and this was especially true for staff who were serving special education students. Lastly, staff also reported a lack of social and emotional support for themselves, and that was a barrier that they emphasized. They often struggled with a work-life balance and didn't feel as though they had the resources to understand how to navigate that. Now I want to hold open for any questions that the board may have.
I did have one question. If it's possible to go back to the presentation quickly. There was a slide, maybe 3, and where we show, yep, if you scroll, I'll tell you which one it was. This, I think back one. Yes. Is it possible to tell us what were the other areas that they were asked about as well? I see
Yeah, of
the one
course.
that had the highest and the lowest, but.
Yep. Yes, that I can read off right now. I just didn't want to, I wanted to highlight the highest and lowest. So the areas that they were asked to report their level of confidence in was using the identified technology tools, delivering synchronous instruction, delivering asynchronous instruction, providing rigorous instruction, providing students with meaningful feedback, reaching students who are not engaged, monitoring students' progress, and using a variety of instructional tools.
Okay. And so I guess my follow-up question would be, as we take this data, how do we provide them with the tools that they need to address areas? I see the lowest area of confidence, but to address some of those things in between, what tools or training may we have? And Mr. Atkins, maybe I'm more so asking you about that and just the thought that we've had around that.
Yes, very good question. So what we're planning to do is take this survey along with the parent survey that we released today, and start with cabinet, start with various role groups that had direct input, including teachers, and beginning to identify kind of really what worked, why, and get to the why, and what didn't work, and work together to figure out how to really make the plan even better than it was when we launched at the end of April. And so it's a work in progress. We know kind of our challenges now that are coming up that we were not aware of before, and we look forward to really delivering even a higher quality model than we did before.
Thank you. Are there any other questions on this presentation?
Sorry, I have a couple questions.
Otherwise-
Alex, is it possible the data on the synchronous instruction, maybe the not at all confident and the somewhat confident?
Yeah, I can read that off to you right now. So 37% of respondents reported that they were either not at all confident or somewhat confident in their ability to deliver synchronous instruction. In comparison, it was, doing the math really quick, 19% who reported being not at all confident or somewhat confident in their ability to deliver asynchronous instruction. So slightly less confident in their ability to deliver the synchronous.
Yeah, so I actually was wondering how much synchronous instruction there was. I didn't see that at the high school, at least not the high school senior that was in my house. So I wonder how much synchronous, and then with that, and I know that Alex, you probably don't have the answer to that question, but with that, if synchronous and really engaging, the most engagement possible when they say mirror school day as much as possible or engaging the students is a problem, is how do we create the tools to do synchronous or engaging instruction well? So I don't know, was the K-5 or the middle school synchronous? I didn't think that there was that much synchronous instruction.
I can jump in a little bit on this one. Remembering there was approximately probably 20 to 30 minutes of synchronous instruction. It varied by grade level and or teacher. And so you're correct in saying there wasn't like hours of synchronous instruction.
For the purpose of our listening audience too, because I know that sometimes we are jargony heavy, can we just state, and I don't want to interrupt the presentation, but just explain the difference between synchronous and asynchronous?
Yes.
Alex, you want to just give a quick?
Yes, I can jump in and say that. So synchronous is delivered real time, whereas asynchronous would be recorded and then watched at a later date. So synchronous would be more of the real time interaction, having a class just meeting virtually.
And asynchronous allows students and families to log into learning when it's convenient per their schedule because it's recorded.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
Sorry about that.
I would like to ask one more question, if I may.
Yes.
Yes. Are we going to use this information then to develop professional development for the teachers so that if we do have to start again in the fall the same way, that we can help them so that, they don't feel so unprepared?
Mrs. Downs Lewis,
Absolutely.
yes, that would be a part of the plan. And keep in mind, as you know, all school districts were at a place where they weren't prepared for this model, and using this data to figure out how to better support teachers using the different platforms, as well as what ongoing PD folks will need to continue to do their job well, I think is important. And that's part of our discussion that will be taking place later this week. And I know that our executive directors and cabinet members have been having conversations around what this can look like and what this will look like.
Yeah, I like to add to that. I think it's also, I mean, there's lots of stuff going on. I think to some extent, it's almost data that you can use in discussing how we do education next year, not how we do online education next year.
Yeah.
Because I don't see it necessarily as competency only, as the teacher competency. You know, how many students have a kitchen where they can, you know, set up a computer and be with their teacher live and monitoring the behavior that's happening in behind them. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that comes in, and teacher capacity or teacher competency isn't the only issue that's that issue. One thing I would say, because I'm studying this in terms of the stuff I do with Ferris, and just I think 2 rules of thumb that we have to keep in mind is the most synchronous, the most engaging learning is always the best. And that seems to be true across the board. And 2 is consistency. And it seems that, and that was something that you measured too, is that when a student expects in-person instruction and then that becomes no longer available, they may view that shift as a disengaging act by the individual who is less interested. So, so I think just consistency and the most engaging is the most important parts that we should try to do, or to argue for more resources so we can figure out how to do this thing the way we would like, which is in person. So.
Yeah, I did have a couple of questions in regards to, I noticed that when it came to, for example, parents and students, or some of the respondents were talking about lack of parent engagement or engagement in general. I'm just wondering if perhaps in the future, we're going to be looking at either online or something that would help parents know how to engage in both the technology and then resources that they might need themselves, or know how to get those resources in order to help their child if they can't. What's the plan for that way? And then a second question is, in terms of the union and equipping teachers, how are you engaging in that partnership or that way to, in essence, I guess, for the union to do its part in helping equip teachers, but also in some way preparing them? So 2-sided question, I guess.
Yeah, so I'll take the first one. Is we're working on Peer University now is to add a section on digital literacy for parents. And so they know the platforms, how to use them, how to get supports, those things. We began to put some things up late last week. We're continuing to add items on our Peer University website to support parents with that. Some of it will be maybe using the tools live, and other ones will be links or other resources that parents can access to learn more about kind of what digital literacy is and the platforms that people use around it. And then can you say the second part again?
The second part was just how working with teachers unions and various unions to in this very odd time of adjustments to digital technology, digital knowledge, and all those pieces to make sure that they are able to reach out to who they need to when they're stressed, and also technology pieces to that.
We definitely plan on reaching out to kind of all role groups, teachers included as well. We know we can't do this alone. And so it's going to take a collective village of GRPS to make this happen and work well. Families are situated and staff are situated very differently maybe than they were on March 12th. And we acknowledge that, and we have to support each other all the way.
And if I can add, that's also considerations that we are taking under advisement as we're doing our plan for the start of the 2020-21 school year, around continuing development of our staff to make sure that they do have the supports, working very closely with our union membership to make sure that their needs are being met, and continuing that conversation to the point that Mr. Atkins just shared, that this is something that we'll have to do together and work through what does that look like.
Thank you.
Okay, do we have any further discussion? Thank you. If not, we are going to move. And Dr. Roby, did you have any other items that you would like to cover? That was all you had there. I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah. Yes.
Wonderful. Next, we have action items. And so I believe that Ms. Pitts will be helping us to address some of the policy changes.
I can talk through a lot of it, and then there's a part where I will call her up if that's all right.
That is fine. Let's still have her join us now if we can.
Okay.
So first, we will start with policy 5350. And I do believe that this is one where Ms. Pitts was going to explain some background for us. Is that correct, Dr. Roby?
I think it was the one on sexual harassment that wasn't it, Kim?
Yeah, but she might want to explain a little bit of this too, because there were a lot of add-ons.
Okay.
Are you asking me, or are you, Ms. Davis, going to start us out? I'm
I
not
can
sure
start out,
what we're
that's
doing.
fine.
Okay.
Okay, so this policy, we had a policy for students for communicable diseases, but we needed to add one for employees. And then we also, for both of those policies, we had to define communicable disease. We had to add that we have to follow the CDC and state guidelines. Both of these policies follow reporting laws that the district has to report. And they both address this first one addresses employee rights, and then in the next policy, it addresses the students' rights. Did I get it all, Sharon?
Yes, you did a very good job.
Okay.
Just to say that we worked very closely with Kim Barron, our Director of Nursing Services, and her group. So she had a lot of advice and influence in helping us develop this policy and the rules. And yes, so that was it.
Okay. Is there any discussion around this policy? Okay, if not, do I have a motion to approve the first reading of policy 5350?
So move.
Report.
Thank you. Ms. Lewis?
It works better if I'm not muted. Okay. Ms. Williams is excused. Dr. Baker?
Yes.
Ms. Davis?
Yes.
Dr. Flores is excused. Ms. Lewis, yes. Reverend Matias?
Yes.
Mr. Ross?
Yes.
Ms. Shotke?
Yes.
President Grant?
Yes. Okay.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Next, we have policy 8510.
Okay, so I kind of addressed this with the last policy, but it's the same communicable diseases, except for this one is in regard to students. So there were the changes made in regards to defining what communicable disease is, with CDC compliance, reporting laws, and for this one, student rights.
Okay, Ms. Pitts, would you like to add anything to that?
No, that was.
Wonderful. Do we have any discussion around this? Okay, do I have a motion to approve the first reading of policy 8510?
So move.
Support.
Yes, Ms. Williams is excused. Dr. Baker,
Yes.
Ms. Davis,
Yes.
Dr. Flores is excused. Ms. Lewis, yes. Reverend Matias,
Yes.
Mr. Ross,
Yes.
Ms. Shotke,
Yes.
President Grant,
Yes,
motion carries.
thank you. Next, we have policy 5037. Ms. Davis?
So this one is sexual harassment for employees. And sexual harassment used to be addressed in another policy, but because of a lot of Title IX regulations that are new, it has been moved to a separate policy. And one of the main things that stood out in our meeting that we talked about was that now anyone who hears about sexual harassment has to report it to a superintendent designated Title IX coordinator. So that's an addition, a brand new thing that now has to be implemented. And that Title IX coordinator is then responsible for responding to that with supportive measures that meet the state and federal requirements. They are not responsible, correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Pitts, but they're not responsible for investigating the allegations, but they will be trained in how to properly respond. And then one thing that we're going to ask Ms. Pitts to talk about with the full board is at our policy meeting, one of the rules is in regards to standard.
Everyone moved just a little bit to make sure it wasn't them that was frozen. Let's see.
Right.
Ms. Pitts, do you mind picking up?
No, Ms. Davis was doing a very good job. So I just want to back up a little bit. You all probably have heard that the United States Department of Education came out with about 2,000 pages of rules and regulations around the new sexual harassment, guidelines. There had not been a new set of federal regulations since the 1970s. So this was huge in this particular area. One of the other things that they did, which was very helpful, is they defined sexual harassment, actually made it very explicit as to what sexual harassment is. They also, as Ms. Davis said, have now split out the roles. Before, the Title IX coordinator, which we've all had, could also be the investigator. Now, hi, Ms. Davis. I just picked up where you were. Okay. So now we have it's a process where you have the Title IX coordinator who initially addresses the issue and provides supportive supports to both the the complainant. Now they also changed the language. Now it's complainant and respondent. And so before we used to have victim and perpetrator. So they tried to neutralize that language, which was, they felt was important. And So the Title IX coordinator actually is the only person other than the complainant who can actually institute a formal complaint that then which has to be investigated. We have to have a separate investigator and a separate person who hears appeals. A separate, after the investigator does their investigation, you have to have a separate decision maker, and then a separate person or entity in which or place where they can appeal. So these things are really extensive. We've put the high level policy pieces, a lot of the policy pieces in the policy, but of the guts of just sort of the procedures or in the rules as we typically do. So one of the things that came up before that it has been standard is the legal standard in which you can use to decide these cases. And we feel like it's very important for the board to decide what the legal standard is because it has great implications in terms of the investigation and the resolution of these cases. So the Department of Education really, in my opinion, punted on this. They said, well, you can use the preponderance of the evidence standard or you can use the clear and convincing standard. We have up until now and forever used the preponderance of the evidence standard. And so I want to just really highlight this. There was I'd say disagreement from at least one of the committee members on the standard that we had proposed. So the committee asked that I kind of get a second opinion, which I did also. And I delivered that to you all. And I actually have the lawyer, in case you have some additional questions about the second opinion, available to answer some questions. But just on a high level and just to frame this, in civil cases, the common evidentiary standard is proof by preponderance of the evidence. And this standard requires that the evidence be more likely than not the evidence more likely than not proves the issue. The evidence needs to be greater than 50%, a 50% likelihood. So sometimes you probably heard the 51%, it's more than 50%. So it has to be more likely than not that the incident actually occurred. The clear and convincing standard is a higher burden of proof. Generally, that standard requires that the evidence be substantially more probable to be true than not true. Now, this is a much higher standard and is generally used in civil cases in claims involving fraud, claims involving wills and inheritance, claims involving important family decisions like withdrawing life support from a family member, and in paternity cases. And you can probably understand why that higher burden is used in those. All other civil cases use the preponderance of the evidence standard. And in fact, that is the standard that's used in all Title VII claims for race, sex, age discrimination, disability discrimination. That's the standard legal standard. And one of the reasons why we propose that is because, mostly because of that, and because we don't want to create a situation where our complainants have to meet a higher burden than you'd have to meet if you went down the road to the federal court. If you went to the Office for Civil Rights or the EEOC and claimed sexual harassment, you would not have to meet this higher standard. And so we felt that it was very important that the standard be the same as one would have to meet across the board in other civil cases. We know through a tremendous amount of research, sexual harassment is real. It happens. It is underreported because people often feel that there is really no redress for it or the redress is not going to be sufficient. And that was another reason why we did not want to discourage students or parents or staff from coming forward, believing that the burden was so high if someone wasn't actually caught in the act, that they probably would be no redress. So I did, as I said, got the additional opinion. Christina Petzel, and forgive me, Christina, for always abusing your last name, is an expert in sexual harassment. She does a tremendous amount of this work across the state. And I had asked her to also give an opinion for this. Before I had given my opinion, I had checked with many of my colleagues around the state to ask what they were doing, what they thought was reasonable. And then Christina actually, luckily for me, supported that. So I don't know if you all have any questions, but I'd like to have the board actually vote on this piece because it has implications in what we would do with our student handbook, our employee manuals, obviously as we do our trainings around this, because every employee has to be trained. And in fact, you as the board will have to be trained on this, and we will be planning some trainings for the board too. And so we need to know what legal standard we're using.
So the choice of this legal standard would be a choice as to at what point whatever consequences are associated with this action are triggered, correct?
Yes, it would be deciding whether or not we felt that the claim was substantiated or not, unsubstantiated. So was there sufficient evidence to believe that more likely than not it happened, or that's the preponderance of the evidence, or if you wanted to use the clear and convincing, it would be that it was significantly likely that this happened, which is it's higher than preponderance, but less than beyond a reasonable doubt, which is the criminal standard.
And we would be making we, the district, would make decisions based on continued employment or the individual in the classroom, et cetera. We would not be imprisoning them or taking them to.
Oh,
So,
no.
So it's really just at what point our responsibilities are triggered, and then other issues would be taken care of in the criminal justice system and not within GRPS, correct?
Exactly. And the other thing is that, so this would be the standard that the investigator would use.
Right.
Now that has to be, so they would present this evidence using this standard, then that would go to the decision maker, which, as I told you earlier, cannot be the investigator. And they would also be able to review the evidence and make a decision. And then that could be appealed by the, whoever it was, the respondent or the claimant. Quite frankly, both of them could appeal the decision if they did not believe that it was supported or right. This does not impact students. For example, it impacts students. The next part is the same policy, but students still have their due process rights around suspension, et cetera, you know, if it was a long-term suspension. So that would be brought forth during that particular hearing piece, you know, if it's student on student as opposed to employee, because a lot of these are potential allegations are between students, not necessarily, and thankfully, between staff and students.
But to me, it seems like this lower level is certainly would create the most safest place for our students, for our students and employees.
May I say something here? The policy as written is, and if we approve it tonight, it's with this second standard as opposed to the first standard. So if we just approve the language as written, then we will be approving the second standard or not?
So the legal standard is not actually in the board policy, although clearly we could put it in there once we know what it is. Mm-hmm. It's in the rules because we put it in the rules because it really deals more with what standard the investigator uses in determining the evidence. And so it's a procedural, more of a procedural piece. So you're not really voting on that because you don't really vote on the rules. But because I think this is really important and this is a substantive thing that will guide us in terms of how we investigate these things and how we train our staff, we felt that it was important that the board speak to this and give us its direction on this.
Yeah, a couple of questions. What's the legal ramifications for the board? What accountability will the board be held to, named in a suit or those kinds of things?
Well, it's the same liabilities the board has now. If we allow sexual harassment to continue unabated, we will, as a district, and that includes the board, could potentially be legally liable. We saw that in some of our neighboring districts where there were successful litigation against them, which is why you want to thoroughly investigate, thoroughly and promptly investigate these cases, and which is why you want to not ignore any complaint. So that doesn't really change the legal liability, except that we expose ourselves to clearly liability if we do not comply with our own policies and rules.
And then also in terms of once an investigation would conclude, whatever evidence was preponderant, is that something then that you all would hand over to the police or would pursue criminal charges, either way, student to staff or staff to student? Or
it depends on what it is. Some things may not be a crime, but they would certainly violate our policy. We do report, families report. We have to report to Child Protective Services, depending on what the particular situation is. But we, sometimes the districts, and not just ours, would defer to the police and let them do their investigation before we did ours. That we can't do. That exposes the district to liability. And obviously, a criminal standard, as we talked about before, beyond a reasonable doubt, the highest standard, and we know why, and that makes good sense, is not the standard that we would use under either one of these. So you could be found not guilty of the criminal act under the criminal laws, but still be in violation of our policy, our sexual harassment policy, and we could still take disciplinary action against you if you were an employee or if you were a student. So one really doesn't have anything to do with the other in terms of our legal responsibility.
Okay.
Did that answer
Mr.
your
Ross,
question?
did you have?
Yep.
Okay.
Mr. Ross, did you have a question? We can't hear you.
No, I didn't have a question. I support the, do we have a motion yet?
We don't have a motion
I
yet.
have one more
Is
quick
there any
question.
other conversation?
So just a quick question. So I counted 3 persons involved. There's the Title IX coordinator, there's the investigator, and there's the decision maker.
And it could be a 4th person because the person who hears the appeal.
Okay, and then
4 people.
And I'm assuming these are 4 different people that all work for the district?
They could be. It does not have to be. One of the things that we have been just throwing out ideas, maybe having someone from the ISD, maybe do the appeal, maybe having someone, an HR professional or someone from another district do our appeal, so that we would have some, we felt like we've been tossing around that would give more credibility to the decision, so that there would be, not saying that we obviously couldn't be independent and do our own job, but it gives another look, another set of eyes looking at it. So that has not been formally, but we've, Lisa, or maybe let me just say, I have been leaning toward trying to find a cadre of people that are external to the district to perhaps do the appeal piece of it.
Yeah, I appreciate your diligence on this. So thanks.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, with that, do I have a motion to approve the first reading of policy 5037?
Motion to approve policy 357.
Support.
Okay, Ms. Lewis?
Mrs. Williams is excused. Dr. Baker?
Yes.
Ms. Davis?
Yes.
Dr. Flores is excused. Ms. Lewis, yes. Reverend Matias?
Yes.
Mr. Ross?
Yes.
Ms. Shockey?
Yes.
President Grant?
Yes.
Motion carries.
President Grant, may I ask if I could have someone make a motion about using the legal standard of preponderance of the evidence?
Yes, Ms. Lewis, do you want to prepare that as
I
you take the motion? You ready? Okay, so can I have a motion to use the legal standard for the preponderance of evidence relating to policy 5037, and then is it also relating to policy 8265?
Yes, yes, it is.
Okay, can I have a motion for that?
So moved.
Support.
Support.
Okay.
Christian, you should be a lawyer.
You did a good job.
Preponderance of evidence.
All right, here we, Mrs. Williams is absent, excused. Dr. Baker?
Yes.
Ms. Davis?
Yes.
Dr. Flores excused. Ms. Lewis, yes. Reverend Matias?
Yes.
Mr. Ross?
Yes.
Ms. Shockey?
Yes.
President Grant?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. And now we have policy 8265, which is regarding students for the, it's the first reading of sexual harassment of students. Is there any separate information that we need to know for this policy item or anything that stands out? Do we have any questions pertaining to this? Okay, do I have a motion to approve the first reading of policy 8265?
So moved.
Support.
Okay, Ms. Williams is excused. Dr. Baker?
Yes.
Ms. Davis?
Yes.
Dr. Flores is excused. Ms. Lewis, yes. Reverend Matias?
Yes.
Mr. Ross?
Yes.
Ms. Shockey?
Yes.
President Grant?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, okay. Next we have policy 5035. Ms. Davis, do you want to give an overview?
Sure. This is not a new policy. This is discriminatory harassment of employees or applicants. The reason that we have to vote on it today is that it has been adjusted to take out it used to have sexual harassment information in this policy, and now that has been pulled to its own policy, which we just voted on.
Okay, any discussion? Okay, can I have a motion to approve the first reading of policy 5035? Or, yes, 5035.
Motion for approval.
Support.
Okay, Mrs. Williams is excused. Dr. Baker?
Yes.
Ms. Davis?
Yes.
Dr. Flores is excused. Ms. Lewis, yes. Reverend Matias?
Yes.
Mr. Ross?
Yes.
Ms. Shockey?
Yes.
President Grant?
Yes,
Motion carries.
thank you. Now we have policy 80. Ms. Davis, is there anything?
This is basically the same thing, but for students.
Yes,
We had to take out the sexual harassment part.
thank you. If there is no discussion, can I have a motion to approve policy 8018?
So moved.
Support.
Okay. Ms. Williams is excused. Dr. Baker,
Yes.
Ms. Davis,
Yes.
Dr. Flores is excused. Ms. Lewis, yes. Reverend Matias,
Yes.
Mr. Ross,
Yes.
Ms. Shockey,
Yes.
President Grant,
Yes.
motion carries.
Thank you. Next, under the action items, we have the revised board meeting schedule for 2020. This includes an addition of virtual board meetings and changing some of that language there. Any discussion around this or any questions? Okay, do I have a motion to approve the revised board meeting schedule?
So move.
Support.
Okay, Ms. Williams is excused. Dr. Baker,
Yes.
Ms. Davis,
Yes.
Dr. Flores is excused. Ms. Lewis, yes. Reverend Matias,
Yes.
Mr. Ross,
Yes.
Ms. Shockey,
Yes.
President Grant,
Yes.
motion carries.
Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda grouping?
So moved.
Support.
Okay. Ms. Williams is excused. Dr. Baker,
Yes.
Ms. Davis,
Yes.
Dr. Flores is excused. Ms. Lewis, yes. Reverend Matias,
Yes.
Mr. Ross, Mr. Ross,
Yes.
Ms. Shockey,
Yes.
and President Grant.
Yes.
Motion carries.
I do have one discussion item for this evening, and that is about committee meetings. So under our, it wasn't a policy, but under our agreement for COVID meetings while we were in shelter, we suspended committee meetings. But as we move into August, I really think that there is work that our committees need to reconvene so that we can begin doing. I wanted to have a moment to get some input from the full board about your thoughts for that. So finance met this, finance is meeting on Monday. Policy met this month. And I know that Dr. Baker has asked about Academic Achievement Committee, but I really think that we all probably have things on the agenda that we need to get to. Any thoughts around that?
I'm in support of that.
I certainly think that, the Academic Achievement Committee was doing good work, but I think that up until recently, we would have just been getting in the way because everything was just kind of trying to make it through each week. But it would be nice to have a meeting, and I can consult with Dr. Roby about how to do this in terms of what education will look like in the coming year. Of course, it looks like it's going to be a little bit longer before we know what that looks like. But anyway, so perhaps in early to mid-August, Academic Achievement Committee. What are the other, gosh, it's been so long. I'm not quite sure who was, we only had a couple with this new. So,
Christian and John.
And Kim Davis, yeah.
Kim Davis.
Wonderful. And Reverend Matias, I think that, legislative will probably also have some work to do as well. So I wanted to have that discussion. We will get meetings on the calendar for August. So not necessarily July. Finance needs to meet, but let's look to resume meetings for all the committees in August.
So we'll work with superintendent and Julie on those dates? 'Cause
Yeah, well, we have meetings on the schedule, I believe. So
I think that we might not, can you guys, it seemed like we were meeting like the third or fourth Wednesday,
I have it marked
Yeah,
on
it
the
was
calendar.
a third Wednesday.
which may be a bit late, given this, because one advantage
Right,
that
and
we have is that
what date is that? Because does it conflict?
that would be
with-
the 19th, so that's fairly late. So I may want to have
I'd
it.
be willing to move it up if you'd like.
So I'd probably check on the 12th. The 19th might be late, given the start of the school year, and if there's any discussion. But I also want to make sure that that's a good time for the superintendent's team to.
Yeah, let's check with Julie so she
I
can take a
have-
look at everyone's calendar.
I have down that academic is the 4th of August.
Oh,
The
Or the
4th,
5th of August, the 5th. Because policy meets the 3rd Wednesday.
the first Wednesday. Okay. Oh yeah, you're right. It's on my calendar too. So yeah, if that works, that would, but that might, if that's not too early for the district.
I think that'll be fun. We just will get everything scheduled and let's look at what agenda items and what staff you may need to be a part of that meeting. But we
Okay.
can keep the regularly scheduled meeting. And so I will have a note for Julie just to, that we're going to reconvene meetings and let us know if there is a committee that is not able to stick to its August meeting. But otherwise, we will stick to the schedule that is already chosen. All right.
President Grant, may I ask a question?
Sure, yes.
Okay. I know that it's possible, with all the politics and everything, that we may or may not start school in the fall. And then if we start school in the fall, are we looking at some sort of a Monday, Tuesday, or a Monday, Wednesday, Tuesday, Thursday, or haven't we gotten that far into the weeds yet to be able to make any decisions?
So I will eventually turn this over to Dr. Roby, but as Dr. Roby stated earlier, the district and the cabinet administrative team are definitely working on putting together a plan that aligns with the governor's plan, and we will be sharing information consistently with families because things are changing at this time, but they are looking at multiple options, but we don't have solid answers for all of that yet. But Dr. Roby.
Is there any idea, do we kind of have to wait until Governor Whitmer tells us what to do, or?
I will let Dr. Roby.
Okay.
Sure. So yes, we look to the governor to provide guidance, and the Michigan Department of Education, both MDE, to provide guidance related to our preparedness plan. And we will have multiple tracks, virtual, in-person, and hybrid. So we want to be prepared and we want to be adaptable depending on where we are in the phases 1 through 6, so that we're able to be adaptable and adjust quickly as to wherever we are on August 25th. So we are planning multiple pathways, either the in-person kind of traditional brick and mortar with the specific guidelines related to that, a virtual experience and what those guidelines are and what supports would be needed. And then the third option would be the hybrid, where we might look at an A day, B day, or an A week, B week. And so we'll build that out to ensure that we have multiple pathways. And the report has to be due to the state by August 15th so that it can be approved. But we will certainly provide the board as well as our staff some idea of which direction that we are headed and get that information to them prior to. With respect to the academic team on the 5th, again, we are starting to convene, so I will touch base with my team, and I know that they're listening right now, but we'll touch base to kind of start fine-tuning what that work looks like, and then have them connect with Julie to reach out to Dr. Baker as well, as he is the representative for that team.
So at this point, if things remain the same, these three options are what we will use. One of those three is what we'll use. But if, God forbid, there is a spike in the virus, then is it possible we do no school?
I don't see us doing no school. We will have the option of, when you're saying no school, like we're not
going in the buildings, but we would do it like we did in the spring.
Yes, ma'am. So if we are between phases 1 through 3, that requires by law at present that we would be in a virtual learning experience where we would not be able to physically go into buildings and there would not be in-person instruction. At phase 4, that allows us to be in-person instruction with some very stringent guidelines as to what that looks like with spacing and mask and how students will flow from one place to another. Phase 5 also is in person, but then the guidelines of how that looks is a lot looser. And phase 6 would be what would be as close to normal as to what we are experienced prior to the COVID experience. So that would be like what we would have looked like in August of last year.
Okay.
Once we get to phase 6.
Thank you, Dr. Roby. So we will, share more information. Definitely have a team that is working very, very hard. And I don't want to push Dr. Roby to give answers that we just don't know yet. Especially, as we have families who look back at this, we want to make sure when they get information that it's very solid and concrete in what we know. And we're working on that. So we will definitely get that information out. Thank you. Next, we do not have any public comment for this evening.
I'm sorry, I did want to make a comment just in regards to due diligence. So I know that we support our governor, but I want us to be able to talk about not so much in the weeds of cases, but at least have a good knowledge of how it's affecting us, so that we could, if we felt the need to provide a different narrative in regards to not so much disagreeing, but just saying based on our student body and the cases and so forth, what are we proposing, even if it goes against the stream of what others might be proposing. I want us to be diligent in looking at those kinds of numbers and our best estimates and insight into some of that, so that hopefully if we could be back in classrooms or similar, or that, phases 4 through 6, that we would have the courage to propose something like that based on what we know, or based on the information that we have.
Let's look at what the administration provides for us as their plan, and then have a conversation going from there. I would appreciate that versus forming opinions on a plan that we do not have yet at this point. But as always, we definitely will be willing to do what's right for our students, for sure. If we could please move ahead, we have superintendent's comments.
Thank you. It has been a busy couple of weeks, and I've said this a couple of times. The Grand Rapids community has welcomed me in such a big way. I have been overwhelmed with gratitude, so thank you again. As I've kind of shared a little bit, we are digging into what is a very layered plan for opening our schools. We want to ensure that we collect information from various data points so that we are ready to welcome our 15,000 plus scholars very soon in the next 6 weeks. We plan on sharing updates of what this looks like in the coming weeks. Finally, I'm getting to know our schools. I've spent the first 2 weeks touring district sites. As of today, I have visited 27 school buildings, and I continue to plan to finish my site visits by the end of this month. And so I have, I'm taking notes on what's been discussed this evening, and we certainly will be following up. I want to reassure you with that. And that summarizes my reflections for this evening. And I will turn it back over to President Grant.
Thank you. And I do want to end with board member comments. So once again, I will just go how I see you. I see Ms. Lewis first.
Yes, thank you. I would just like to welcome Dr. Roby to her first official meeting here as our superintendent, and also to thank her and all of the other people behind the scenes here who I know will have to be doing so much work in order to plan for all these different contingencies. And so I'm very proud of those people and want to congratulate them. And also I know that there are teachers who have already started working on all of this and preparing for different options that they might have in the fall. So congratulations and thank you for all the work you do.
Thank you, Ms. Shockey.
Yes, just simply this evening, welcome, Dr. Roby. We are just so delighted that you are with us officially, and we've got some tough work ahead, but you've got a board that's willing to work really hard alongside you. So we're just ready and really, really excited to welcome you to our community.
Reverend Matias.
Yeah, again, welcome to our new superintendent, Dr. Roby. Yeah, just kudos to all of the work. Certainly the community has responded in so many ways. I mean, from giving our families food to providing, virtual tutors and wherever they could find them to help a child out, as well as some of the social emotional stuff. It's been tough for our teachers, the isolation, and again, people have stepped up. So really appreciate it. What an honor it is to work among this group of board members who are giving so much to our community. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ross.
No comment.
Dr. Baker.
Yeah, just following the same theme, but I'm looking at the list of attendees to this meeting whose faces aren't in front of us, and I know that they're working like crazy to get this district going. So I want to appreciate their work and welcome you, Dr. Roby. Really looking forward to meeting you and talking to you one-on-one. And I'm glad you're, it's good weather in Grand Rapids for you.
Ms. Davis.
I don't have any additional comments.
Thank you. Once again, welcome, Dr. Roby. Thank you very much to the team that's working really hard to make sure that we can provide a safe space to our students in just a few weeks. And thank you to the community that is tuning in. I look forward to partnering with the community on this. It's definitely something that is going to take a village to pull off. So I just want to always keep that in the forefront. This is not us against anyone. It's never the educators and the people who are working hard for your students against the community. It's only us working with you. So thank you for staying at the table with us, and meeting adjourned.